more critical hospital projects in every corner of the province. Mr. Speaker, this is the difference between a government that wants to get things done for every building Highway 413, 413, and reducing commute times for over 300,000 drivers in York, Peel and Halton region by almost 30 minutes a day. Even the construction of the 413 would create 3,500 jobs and contribute $350 million to our economy. Wow. The evidence is clear, Mr. Speaker. It is time to get the 413 built. We are also saying yes to building the Bradford bypass and cutting drive times in Simcoe and York region for commuters and truckers by over 60%. We are saying yes to allocating over $2.5 billion to expand and repair more than 580 provincial highways and bridges. Wow. And, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear on this. People are already struggling to make ends meet. Our plans for road, bridge or highway projects do not include tolls. We are saying yes to continuing our progress on the largest subway expansion in Ontario history. Hear, hear. Yes to delivering our commitment on two-way, all-day GO transit. And yes to Northeastern passenger rail service from Toronto to Timmins. Mr. Speaker, our government also realizes this foundation must be laid in every corner of the province, which is why our government is saying yes to doubling the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund over 5 years to support over 400 small, rural and northern municipalities. Not only will these projects create good-paying jobs over the next 5 years, they will help keep our communities safe and support the recovery of main streets across the province. Mr. Speaker, there are regions of Ontario that were ignored by previous governments. For too long, the 24,000 people who called Ontario's far north home, 90% of whom identify as First Nations, have been denied investment and opportunity. Same. It is also time to finally saying yes to make real investments in the north, starting with the Ring of Fire. Mr. Speaker, the Ring of Fire is one of the most important mineral deposits in all of Canada. It can be a vital source of economic development for communities across the north, and especially for First Nation communities. Critical minerals are essential to the batteries, electric vehicles, and electronics manufacturing our economy badly needs. An investment in the Ring of Fire is an investment in northern prosperity. For the people of Ontario and for all Canadians. Mr. Speaker, it is time to get the road to the Ring of Fire built. And our government is doing our part. We are prepared to invest $1 billion to get the job done. First Nations are doing their part. We are working closely with Martin Falls and Webequie First Nations. We hope the federal government is prepared to come to the table to support this project. And I would certainly hope that other parties in this legislature stop holding back the Ring of Fire, stop saying no, and finally join us in saying yes to getting the road built. Hear, hear. And create opportunities for communities in the far north to pursue the brighter future they deserve. Hear, hear. Mr. Speaker, it takes more than money to build roads and highways or to get new hospital and long-term care spaces off the ground. It also takes workers. Mr. Speaker, it is clear that many workers and families in this province are struggling. Take-home pay has not kept pace with rising costs of essentials that families rely on, such as groceries. And during the pandemic, workers had our backs. The Premier and our government will always have theirs. We want Ontario workers in a race to the top, not a race to the bottom. Hear, hear. That's why, Mr. Speaker, our government is working for workers. It starts with the minimum wage. Our government has a plan to raise Ontario's general minimum wage to $15 an hour, effective January 1st of 2022. Ontario workers deserve it, and we're not stopping there. We're also eliminating the legal exceptions that allowed servers in bars and restaurants to be paid less than the general minimum wage. And we will resume raising the minimum wage on an annual basis based on the Ontario Consumer Price Index as of October 1st, 2022. While other politicians in other places talk about doing more to help workers, our government, under the leadership of the Premier, has delivered real action that puts workers first. And we're just getting started. We're investing an additional $5 million into the Second Career Program and expanding its scope to include newcomers, gig workers, and people with disabilities, and plan to extend the Ontario Jobs Training Tax Credit, which provides up to $2,000 for training expenses for workers to upgrade their skills. If you are prepared to put in the work, time and effort to learn a new skill to support your family, our government is prepared to put in the money and give you every opportunity to see it through. Hear, hear. The skilled trades provide good jobs that can support families, but too few young people see the trades as a career opportunity. That's why our government is saying yes to building up the skilled trades. Hear, hear. We will invest an additional $90 million in a skilled trade strategy that will break the stigma and make it even easier to learn a trade in the province of Ontario. And it is why we are saying yes to proposing a new staycation tax credit and supporting hospitality and tourism workers. A 20% tax credit that puts money back in the pockets of Ontario travellers and families when they choose to travel right here at home in Ontario. Mr. Speaker, our commitment also extends to manufacturing workers. Where the previous government said no to Ontario's manufacturing workers and drove some 300,000 good-paying jobs out of the province, our government is saying yes to creating thousands of well-paying jobs for Ontario workers in the industries of the future. Our government, since our government came to power, we have seen over $5 billion committed in new investment in Ontario's auto sector from major manufacturers. Let me just highlight a few. It includes a $1 billion investment from General Motors to manufacture a new line of electric vehicles at its Ingersoll facility, and over $1 billion to reopen its Oshawa assembly plant and add production at its facility in St. Catharines. Here, here. Our government recognizes that the pandemic is not over. But our government is also looking forward to the future. And despite repeated calls from members of the opposition to impose painful tax hikes onto Ontario families and job creators, Mr. Speaker, we have chosen a different path. Our plan for recovery is built on growth, not tax increases or spending cuts. For 2021-22, we are projecting a deficit of $21.5 billion, which is $11.6 billion lower than the outlook published in the 2021 budget. So, contrary to what some political leaders would have you believe, this lower deficit stems from strong economic growth. Mr. Speaker, our government's plan is prudent. Our plan is responsible. It's a plan to protect the progress we have made. It's a plan to build the future, and it's a plan to work for the workers who all make it happen. Mr. Speaker, our province has come so far. The door in front of us is wide open, and we have much more to do. So let's not go back to the politics of no and instead let's say yes. Yes to building, yes to investing, and yes to growing. Let's say yes to the better and brighter future that the people of Ontario deserve. Thank you.
Response? Response? I recognize the member from Waterloo, who has up to 5 minutes to reply.
Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to rise on behalf of Her Majesty's official opposition to respond to the Fall Economic Statement. The Fall Economic Statement is a key opportunity to communicate with Ontarians, and it should clearly articulate what does this government stand for? Who are they working for? Have you been listening to people? And are you prepared to demonstrate some courage and act on those issues? On education, healthcare, childcare, and the crisis of climate change. This mini-budget failed to do those things. Instead, it showed Ontarians that this PC government doesn't want to spend the money on the health care and education that Ontarians deserve. We know countless examples, Mr. Speaker, of missed opportunities and warped priorities. We have seen this most recently with the Bradford bypass being moved to save a golf course owned by the father of the Associate Minister of Transportation. So billions can go to a Highway 413, which municipalities are fighting, and one that will compromise our environment, while Highway 69 requires immediate help. Economics 101, Mr. Speaker, maintain and protect your investments. What is most shocking and disappointing to us in this fiscal update is the $467 million base funding cut to education. Speaker, can you imagine cutting funding to education while we remain in a pandemic, when we know that learning was interrupted and mental health resources are depleted?